This is Amy Rubenstein, and you're listening to the Matt Balaker podcast.
Hello, good people out there. Thank you once again for tuning into the Matt Balaker podcast. And I think it was Gandhi who said, be the change you want to see in the world. So I'm going to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. And you do what's best for you. I'm very excited for today's guest because we've had a wonderful representation from the Windy City. I have friends, family, casual acquaintances there. But today's guest is a wonderful human. She's the CEO at Clear Investment Group and partner at Windy City. These firms have sold over $500 million in real estate, people. She's an honors graduate from Brandeis, and she serves as artistic director at the Windy City Playhouse. Please welcome Amy Rubenstein to the program. How are you doing, Amy?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. How are you doing today?
I'm excited. I'm honored to have you on. In fact, as we record this, my parents are in Chicago. I have a lot of relatives there. It's my mother's hometown, and I'm not there right now. So while I'm really excited to talk to you, I wish I was doing this interview from Chicago. So for people who are lucky enough to visit the great city, what food options would you recommend if you're going to say spend like a weekend there?
Oh, great. So I'm a vegan, so I'm going to give you all the best vegan choices.
Perfect.
So Planta just opened up on Clark, which is great. They have other locations around the country, and they're fabulous. You won't even know it's vegan. There's a great restaurant called Fancy Plants that I love. And Bloom. There's a restaurant called Bloom that has a really great chef's tasting menu.
Bloom, a great chef, a great vegan chef's tasting menu. That's awesome. And obviously we want to talk about real estate, but you are multi-talented. You're a philanthropist, and you have a passion for the arts and live theater. Where did this enthusiasm come from?
I have always been in theater my entire life. So since I was 6 years old, theater was my world, and I fell into real estate by accident, really needing a way to support myself and to be intellectually challenged at times where I wasn't. And so that's where real estate came in. Real estate sort of took over my life, but I do love theater. It's in a tough place right now in this country, but it is a love of mine.
Sure. So real estate took over your life, but it didn't kill the passion you have for theater. And I want to ask you about a show you created with multiple award-winning star chef Rick Bayless.
Okay, so now I have to plug Rick's restaurants for sure.
No. Oh, well, only his vegan ones. Don't worry about it. He has enough publicity. I mean, like, let's be honest.
Gotta go to Frontera Grill, Topolobambo, Shoko, Bar Sotano. Those are the best restaurants in Chicago.
Well, you're just a wealth of knowledge, but I understand this is an immersive play. So it's like, what for our audience who's unfamiliar, including me, how's an immersive play different from a quote unquote traditional play, Amy?
So immersive plays are plays that the audience goes inside of. So as opposed to watching it from the outside, they get to experience it from the inside, as if they're living through those moments with the characters themselves. It doesn't mean interactive; it just means immersive as being immersed in that world.
Okay, so it's different from like Second City, and another famed Chicago institution where it's improv and people are giving out suggestions. This, you're part of it, but you're not necessarily in charge of the creative direction.
Yeah, you're not in charge of it as an audience member. You're not really even participating.
Okay.
You're really observing, but from the inside.
You're observing from the inside. Well, speaking of, you have an insider's eye in real estate. But you didn't just become this fantastic real estate professional. You know, it started somewhere. So take us back a little bit. What was your first job, Amy?
I worked on a dude ranch in Colorado for 7 years. I started when I was 11, and I would give people tours horseback riding through the mountains.
Oh my, you are my wife's hero now. So you actually worked on a dude ranch. Um,
Yeah.
what are some of the lessons you learned from working 7 years on a dude ranch?
Um, I think it was mostly about how people treat others. I was I was just a kid working with a bunch of cowboys, and often we would get tourists that would come in and treat us like we were, just the help that was
Uh,
around, and we were just the help that was around, but it would be different than had I met these people at a party that I was invited to,
yeah.
and I think I learned a lot about how to treat others.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a rule. I don't know if it's the silver, bronze, or golden rule, something like treat others how you'd want to be treated.
There you go, the golden
Did,
rule.
and how do you try to, I mean, I think we all want to do that. I think it's a wonderful adage, but how do you try to live that, Amy?
I think it's about having perspective. It's one of the things I love about theater as well, is it's like, how do you teach people to have perspective? And it's showing them different worlds that other people live in. If you're lucky enough, you get to experience some of those things yourselves. If you've ever been a waiter, if you've ever been, worked in retail, just places where you get to see another world, another side.
Yeah, I have a couple kids, and I wish this for them, and really anyone. We should all work in food service. It was one of my first jobs. But for those people who are like, waiting on tables, you get to see the best and worst of humanity. And if you can bounce with that, I think you have a huge leg up.
It's exactly what I tell my kids. They have to work in retail or wait staff at some point, because how else do you understand that?
No, I mean it's not something you can learn in school. They don't really teach it in business school. But just circling back to the dude ranch, I finally got on a horse again. I'm pretty uncoordinated, but my wife grew up. I think she called it European riding. It was one that you do.
English.
I'm showing my ignorance, but like equestrian style. I understand it's different from Western. I mean, I understand there is a difference. I should say, Amy.
Correct.
Can you shed some light on the differences?
So English writing is a lot more formal. It's very proper. It's you're sitting upright quite a bit more. Um, and Western writing is a little more laid back,
Hmm.
physically and mentally. Um, there's still definitely skills to it, but it is a lot less formal. I prefer Western, although I've written both. It's my preference is Western.
Sounds good. More laid back, a little less formal.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and I understand, like this kind of transitions nicely to a question I had. You're licensed in California as well as Illinois.
correct.
Um, is one more laid back? Is one more formal? Like it.
So I mean,
What's
I
your
work all
experience?
over the country,
Oh,
and I
okay,
don't really buy or sell for other people.
gotcha.
So for me, as far as my broker's license, I use it to it's like the knowledge that I have. It's a thing, sort of like the expertise that was part of my foundation. But there are absolutely parts of the country that are more or less formal, or quote unquote. But in some ways, I look at it like, if you work in Texas, if
Mhm.
you're a property owner in Texas, that's like, you can sort of do whatever you want. That feels much more like Western riding to me. Versus if you own property in New York, that is absolutely English riding. You have to be very buttoned up, and the rules are very stringent,
Wow,
and
that was the
you really
most.
have to watch your form a lot more.
You
So
have to
there's
watch
my
your form.
analogy. So.
That was the most perfect horse riding to real estate analogy we've had on this program, Amy. Thank you so much for that. Wow.
I've never gotten to make that analogy, but glad we got to do
So
that.
I'm taken that. That was so impressive. Uh, I mean, like any career path, you don't just start off becoming an expert in it. What was your first job in real estate?
So I started getting interested in real estate when I saw the value of a home that I owned rising, and I thought it was because I was so brilliant. It wasn't. It was because the market was going up. But
It could have been both, but please continue.
it got me interested in learning about real estate and trying to figure out what is this thing and how did I just make money on that house. And so what I did was I got my broker's license to start to understand it. And then a friend of mine was working in investment banking, and he came across an underwriting model for multifamily properties for apartment buildings. And so he sent me this underwriting model, and I started digging into that. And I thought, I really should try to buy a small apartment building. And so a I syndicated some money from a couple family members and friends and bought 6 studio apartments in Hollywood in California.
In Hollywood, California. So, and I like syndicated. I've begged, plead, and borrowed, not stolen, but what are some of your syndication techniques? Like it sounds like at the time you didn't have a ton. And
Oh my God! At the
background
time,
this, you're
I
like,
think people
we're
were
gonna buy
just
money, we're gonna buy properties in Hollywood. What was your pitch, Amy?
at that time. So one of the investors was the guy who sent me this model.
Okay.
It was a small. I mean, this was a small building. It was 6 studio apartments with no parking. So just to kind of give you an idea.
Sounds like Hollywood, yeah.
They were all the units were vacant. So the at the time this was not a hugely expensive property. But it was I'm trying to think of who all the 3 people were that were invested in this. But basically I had to let everybody into this with me and say, this is what we're doing. Here's what I've learned. Here's what this model is. And I went through a bunch of different deals until we found one that we all said, this looks good, let's try this. And then I did it. Bought that building and I sold it 6 months later. I fixed it up, occupied it, sold it 6 months later. And then after that, it started to get easier to raise money. Then it's like, oh, I did that one. So those same people wanted to go into the next one, plus a couple other people, right? I did the same thing. I bought 2 deals, fixed those up, sold those deals, and then bought 4 deals. Eventually, you start to get a track record. Now I've been doing this for 20 years. So
you snowballed pretty quickly. Like sometimes people don't even get a welcome mat in 6 months. Like
well,
I lived in Hollywood and I didn't get furniture for a year, so you're ahead of the curve.
So again, this is not so much about my brilliance, but about the point in the market that we were at. So
Okay.
we're talking about 2003. The market was going up until you hit 2008, 2009. So I was riding an up wave. I didn't understand that that's necessarily what that was at that time. But yes, I was adding value to things, but I was also riding this current. I think you really start to know how much you know when the market goes the other direction that you weren't going in before.
Well said.
That's when you start to understand, what you know and don't know, and then you learn a lot from that.
Okay. And for maybe some of our younger listeners and viewers out there, from 2003 to 2006, it was a time, especially in California, where you could put next to nothing down. If you had a pulse, you could get financing. I'm being a little bit facetious, but not a lot. And then a lot of these adjustable rate mortgages adjusted in a way that was not favorable to the buyers. So a lot of people who were in the quote unquote easy money game had a hard smack in the face, including me. What was your take, from transitioning from, call it 2007, the boom, to 2008, 9, when the bottom just kind of fell out?
So 07, 08 was great for us. Those are really great years. We were super high leverage, so you're absolutely right. The oddity of that downturn, so I would say just to kind of give an overview on downturns, I think right now we're in the third downturn of my personal career, because I definitely think we are in a downturn right now. That particular downturn in 2008 and 9 was difficult because we got hit from a lot of different directions. So interest rates rising, sure. But the crazy thing, it was real estate was a house of cards at the time, and everything started to crumble. And when everything crumbled, it hit us in every different direction. So rents started to plummet, and people scattered, like vacancies went up like crazy. And all of a sudden we were sitting there with half occupied buildings wondering, where did all the people go? But the people moved in with other people, kids moved in back home, people were running for the hills. And so not only did you get hit with rising interest rates, but you also got hit with rising vacancy rates and dropping rents. So all of that hit at the same time. That was a weird period of time, and a great time to learn a lot. We've been lucky in 20 years, we've never lost money for an investor.
Wow. I think you are a unicorn, but first continue. Yeah.
But I honestly, I had physical pains during those times. So it wasn't like it was all like rainbows and unicorns. It was dark back then. But at that time, I was mostly in California. California real estate was a bit different than the rest of the country. But we climbed back out of it. The name of the game with real estate is you got to stay in it, because when things get bad, that's not the time to get out.
No, that turns short-term investors into long-term very quickly.
Yes. Oh, yes. And you have to always be able to be a long-term investor. I am not a long-term investor. Our model is not long-term. We buy and sell things very quickly. So we're like 2 to 4 year holds. That's fairly fast. Mm-hmm. That being said, I never buy a deal without a plan B that is a long-term plan. It's like I have to know that I can hold this thing for 10 years.
That's a wise philosophy. It's like the goal might be to liquidate it in 2 to 4 years, but if you have to hold it for a decade plus, you'd be content with it. I like that.
Yeah.
What are some of the better kind of bangs for your buck when it comes to renovations, whether it's on a private, a home scale, or if you're renovating a building? I guess what separates the pros from the amateurs, in your opinion?
As far as renovations, I guess it depends what your intentions are. I mean, I suppose let's talk very specifically about income property, right?
Sure,
so where's the best bang for your buck when you're putting money into things? The obvious answers are flooring. If you spend a little bit more on flooring that's going to last a little bit longer, and that looks more modern and that can withstand multiple tenants, that's an upgrade that's going to pay itself back. You can say the same thing with like countertops or tile, things like that sort of last a little while, that still give you a good look but last. These aren't really exciting answers for you, though.
Well, oftentimes the best advice isn't exciting. It's like they say, the kitchen is the heart of the home, so maybe put more money into that with countertops and not on a sauna or a home gym or something very specialized.
Yeah. So I am very specifically a Class C workforce housing operator. So we are all about, providing a living space that is safe and habitable and people can feel proud to live in, but not necessarily the space that's going to offer the most amenities, or that's going to be, it's going to feel like you live in a hotel. So that's not necessarily us. So other people might give different answers as far as,
Gotcha.
And that's what amenities.
But for your specialty, it's about value. Like you said, it's about kind of creating a home. And
exactly. For us, that's exactly what it is. It's about value. but also having pride in where you live. So
Sure.
we don't want to operate a property that people dread coming home to.
No, you don't want to have Slumlords Inc. where,
Right? Exactly.
so there's so many like niches and subcategories within real estate. How did you find yours?
I think I've worked in a lot of different asset classes in real estate, so not only multifamily, but also retail and office and industrial. I found that I loved multifamily the most within multifamily. I've owned all different classes within multifamily, A class, B class, C class, D class. The reason I like C class multifamily the best is, and very specifically what I do with it, is we buy very distressed properties, we stabilize them, and then we sell them. And what I love about that is watching the transformation of the community and really getting to see that we're starting with something that's not functioning from a financial standpoint, yes, but also from a physical standpoint, from a community standpoint. It's a property that's usually a sore to the community. It's an eyesore to the people who live there. It's we're not the asset itself is not providing back to the tenants in the way that anyone would want.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we're doing is going in and trying to fix that. And so we get to see the largest transformation. So if a property is like, needs to go 3 levels up and we take it 2 levels up, we're the ones that get to see the biggest transformation on it. We're the ones that are really cleaning up what the property looks like and how it functions. And it's very rewarding to get to watch those changes. And I love investments that are tangible.
Sure.
It's a very simple thing to understand. I like the simple things to understand.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was Warren Buffett, but says I invest in only things I understand. And I've made the mistake, I think lots of us have. It's like, oh, this is so complicated. I got to be part of it when,
It's absolutely. Every time I've invested in something that I didn't understand, I've failed. Every single time.
That's why I didn't invest in Bitcoin, and not because I'm a genius.
That's like a perfect example. I could not wrap my head around it. I put some, small amounts of money in it because that's what everybody was saying to do.
Right, and there in any asset class or sector, there's going to be people who make money, and more power to them. You can't be an expert in everything. But I want to talk a little bit about this revitalization process, because you mentioned you like tangible investments. That I think that makes a lot of sense. And when we see like shows that do like before and afters, it's usually for one family. You get to do it on an order of magnitude higher than that. Like, what part of the transition process gives you the most joy?
So we really like, so no tenants really love their landlord. It's very hard to get a tenant to love their landlord. But usually we're buying properties where people really dislike their landlord and we get to come in and be the heroes for a bit. And so what we try to do right off the bat is put the first money into things that people can see. Because a lot of times we put money into things people can't see. It makes the property better, but it's not going to make people happy right away. So if we
got new plumbing lines, people. Go ahead.
If we buy a building and we are changing all of the life safety issues, so we're putting in new smoke detectors and sprinkler systems and fire alarms and fire rated doors and stuff like that, the tenants aren't noticing that. Nobody's appreciating what we're doing, even though we're doing what we have to do. We're keeping people safe.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be appreciated by anyone. Nobody notices it, and it just costs a lot of money. It's not sexy. No. So what we do like to do is the things that people can see very, very quickly. So an example, we just bought a portfolio in Shreveport, Louisiana. And it's a large property. It's probably like 10 acres, and it has huge parking lots. And there were basically like craters in the parking lot. The parking lot was so bad that you couldn't even drive in. People were getting flat tires all the time. New tenants didn't want to come in. People were leaving because you couldn't get to your parking spaces because it was so bad. And we came in, and the first thing we did was rip out that parking lot and put in a new one, because it's what people can see right away. So that then when we come in and we say, well, we really would like you to pay your rent, well, they're seeing what we're doing with their rent.
Right.
It's very, very clear that we're putting money back into the property. And so we'll do that kind of stuff first so people can start to trust us. It makes everyone feel good because you start to see the difference quickly. So the staff is feeling better, the tenants are feeling better, and we start to build a nice rapport with the tenants that way. And so we'll do stuff like that. Landscaping, all of a sudden we'll pick that up right away and work on that because people can see it. And then we'll start to get to the things that people can't appreciate necessarily as much.
Right. You'll start with the flowers, then you'll do the drywall later. So you get
yeah.
One of my wife's guilty pleasures is Selling Sunset. It's a real estate show that has a spinoff called Selling Orange County, and I've watched it too. I've heard it's not realistic at all. Are there any shows that you have seen that are either incredibly lifelike or very far from the truth, Amy?
I don't watch a lot of these real estate shows, and people say this to us all the time, like, oh my gosh,
Good for you.
should do a show about this, because there's so much drama in what we do. It's usually good drama, but there's a ton of drama in what we do. And because we buy things that are so messy that it's always a little bit wild in the beginning. It always feels a little like crazy. And then we get these big transformations. And so in some ways, it does feel like we're on some sort of reality TV show.
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of like a discovery period when you buy these properties. Then if you're revitalizing them, something's not going to go to plan. Is there anything that sticks out? Like, oh my God, we found the fossils of King Tut, or so. Like, is there anything like particularly memorable about
some fun? I mean, as far as like what, so we bought a building once that Al Capone owned in Chicago. It hadn't been touched in, oh my God, 50 years. And he had it as a hotel and brothel. And then there was a speakeasy in the basement. And when we went, and the basement hadn't been touched, I swear to God, since Al Capone was there, when we went through and we found these glass flasks, looking around my office to see if I have any here. No, I don't. We found these glass flasks for liquor that was like and it was absolutely from that time period.
That's so cool.
So it was like, finding these, it was like an archaeological dig through Al Capone's speakeasy.
There's historical relics from brothels and speakeasy. That's very, very cool.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this isn't exactly along the lines of what you're saying, but the first building I bought was owned by Charlie Chaplin, so that was very exciting.
It's Hollywood times. If it was owned by a celebrity, I think it's worth at least 18% more. That's my estimate.
Sold the building to Drew Barrymore. So
nice.
But other things that we found, I mean, we're always finding sorts of things that we didn't expect, or I was just saying this in a meeting today, actually, is we make big plans for exactly how a project is going to go. And I have never done a project that has gone to plan. So the plan is a really nice outline as to how you think it's going to go, but it's, you have no idea how it's going to go until you get in there and you get started. So it sort of sets like a skeleton for us, but when we're trying to get from A to B, we're going to pass through Z and S and T and U, and we had no plans to do so, but it always happens.
Not a straight line. What tips or advice do you have to help people stay level-headed during situations like that, where you have a plan and it's totally awry?
I mean, it took me getting through a downturn to be able to stay level-headed. because you don't really know once you go through something that's so hard, like and specifically with once you have a business that goes through a downturn and you come out the other side, you have a new perspective on what problems are.
Hmm.
And I tell my team this every day, and every time I hire a new person, we are going to have emergencies every single day. Every single day, something is going to go terribly wrong. And what our job is just to get it back on track as quickly as possible and as most efficiently as possible. And we have to stay level-headed through that because there's no choice. You'd end up in a loony bin if you lost your mind every time a problem happened, because this is all I do is put out fires and solve problems. And so it's I think it's just having one of our core values in our office is positivity. So we just have to approach everything in a very positive way with like, yep, here's another problem. We'll put out that fire. We're gonna keep on going. But it's just that's the cost of doing business. Is you're gonna have major things go wrong every day.
Yeah, I guess they say problems are opportunities, but it's a lot easier said than actually practiced. So my hats off to you for smiling through it all. We're in a period of maybe not historically high interest rates, but when you kind of look at the last 20 years, we are. How has that impacted the real estate business for you?
For us, it impacts it in a very positive way. Because what happens is buyers get a little nervous, they start to scatter a bit. There's not as much deal flow happening because there aren't as many buyers right now, and it opens up a lot of opportunity for us. So we really love this time. We're actually in a major buying mode right now. So for us, this is great. There's a lot of distress on the market. There's tons to buy. And not a ton of competition. That being said, we also own some stuff that is getting negatively affected by rising interest rates. So I understand the pains of it and what happens on the other side of it. So it's not, it's not that every aspect of our business is always perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tough thing to deal with when you buy a property and you underwrite it at a certain interest rate, and then all of a sudden you're 300 basis points above what that interest rate was. Those are crazy times. Again, you have to kind of get back to this idea of when things are bad, that is not the time to sell. When things are bad, you want to try to hold on. If you have to sell, then you got to make the most of it. Then you got to do what you have to do to get the best price you can and move on. But if you don't have to sell, if you can hold on, you just got to hold on until things level out, because the real estate market goes up and down and up and down and up and down. This is the historical evidence says that we go through cycles in real estate, very, very high highs, very, very low lows. That's why people make a lot of money in real estate. But people can lose a lot of money in real estate too, right? You got to be able to withstand the lows.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it did. And on a household level, people grapple with, when should I buy? If one can afford to, but inevitably they'll come to a real estate agent and they'll say, "Oh, it's always a good time to buy." That's kind of the perception. Is that the reality? Is there ever not a good time to buy?
That it is always a good time to buy. I absolutely believe that. Now, that doesn't mean that everything is always good to buy all the time. Just have to figure out what do you buy at any point in time. But I believe in always putting money into the real estate market. Similar to people say that same thing about the stock market, right? If you're constantly buying, you're going to do well. I do very much believe that in real estate. But you have to find what is the appropriate deal to buy at each given point in time. For us, it's always distress. We always buy distressed properties, and there's distress at every point in the market. The distress might be different when the market is low versus when the market is high, but we are always buying distressed. We're always finding distressed deals at every point in the market. It's a matter of making sure that your underwriting is trying to take into consideration the current situation and not to be too speculative. we don't like to be fortune tellers on anything that we do. So I love playing the game, what's going to happen with interest rates, but not when I'm modeling out a deal. When I'm modeling out a deal, I want to assume the worst always. Like nothing's going to get better. We're going to stay in this downturn. Things are going to get a little bit worse. There's not going to be any growth. And if I can pencil out a deal in a downturn to look really good to sell in a downturn, then that's when I have, that's when I feel comfortable. I will never model something that takes into consideration the growth outside things that I can control. Okay. So I don't want to take into consideration any sort of macroeconomic growth, any sort of sub-market growth, rent growth. These are things I try not to take into consideration at all.
So you try to control what you can control and realize it's not always sunshine and rainbows. That you're speaking like a nuanced professional. What advice would you give to yourself, say 2 decades ago when you're starting out in the business?
I think 2 decades ago and I actually am an optimist by nature. Like I'm a very, very positive person, and I
find that very easy to believe. Please continue.
But I try not to be an optimist with my underwriting, and I would say that would be the biggest I didn't understand that I understood it in an intellectual way, and that people say the market goes up and down, but it's hard to really understand that until you live through it. I would also say be prepared for things beyond what you can ever imagine would happen. And that's almost impossible, right? But it's like downturns are going to come, and we have no idea what that means. We have no idea how they're going to manifest themselves. We have no idea what variables they're going to hit. We don't know the depths of them. We don't know the length of them. And so you have to be willing to walk into the unknown and feel strong about that. How do you do that?
I love that, being strong while walking into the unknown. That's so profound. Like there might be a play there somewhere, Amy. We're going, like my wife and I, we're going through a planning process for a remodel of a home that we're living in, and it's frustrating to say the least. And there are lots of regulations or laws or departments locally that I would like to see changed. Are there any, and this, we don't have to be grounded too much in reality, but if you could have a magic wand, what either laws, regulations, what have yous would you want to see changed in the real estate industry, Amy?
I'm very against rent control, as I'm sure most landlords are. I've worked in rent control. I spent my first, I don't know that this is exactly what you wanted me to go into, but I'm going to go into it now because you got me there.
Go for it.
I started my first 5 years of real estate were very focused on only buying rent control, purposely. And the reason is it was a bit of an act of civil disobedience. I very much disagree with rent control. And what I found was, but I'm also a rule follower. I really am. I don't like to break the rules, but I was taught that civil disobedience is important.
Yeah.
So, so what I found in what really bothered me the most about rent control, specific to, this was Los Angeles, was that it was related to the year that a property was built, not related to anything to do with the financial stability of the tenant themselves. And so the people that were taking advantage of rent control were the most sophisticated people, actually. It was like lawyers who were paying $500 a month in a unit that should have been $2,500 a month, and they didn't want to go anywhere. Or it was professionals who were getting these massive discounts at what? Or what? Why? So that's what really upset me about it, because I really believe in helping people that need financial help for sure. But this wasn't, rent control is not that system. It's too big. When you put any sort of blanket rental control on anything, it's just too massive to target the help to specific people.
Right.
We saw similar things happen with COVID, like with rental assistance or any sort of financial assistance, where it was some blanket, everyone's going to get this money. It doesn't help. It puts us in a bad situation, right? We watched it very clearly with COVID, where everybody got money, and what did it do? It threw us into this, inflation that we're in right now. So, but, when you see that with rent control, it's similar. The effect is similar. It throws off the market in a weird way. It doesn't help the right people, and often it hurts the people that it was trying to help. So that was my mission back then. I stopped buying rent control because you have to really micromanage it. I was very successful at it because the laws were very strict. The laws were very strict on the landlord, but they were also very strict on the tenants. And so, I could get around rent control in many ways that was completely legal. But it took so much time and energy to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But when people talk about trying to add rent control to other cities, I think it's a really bad idea, because it throws off the market. What happens is you don't get development. You don't get people putting money into the properties that they should be putting into. You don't end up with a fair market. I very much believe in capitalism, and I very much in a free market with some government controls, and those just were the wrong ones. So if I had to say one blanket thing, that would be it.
I hear you. I mean, they say all real estate is local, and if you adopt rent control policy, that's a pretty blunt, widespread instrument. And I was an econ major, and I don't remember a ton from my undergrad, but I do remember one professor who worked in real estate. He said the best way to create slums and increase, discriminatory rental practices and just all sorts of illegal shenanigans is have rent control.
100%. 100%. It absolutely backfires and hurts the people you're trying to help.
No arguments here. None whatsoever. So thank you for sharing that. But I want to know, like, you've done so many cool things. What is one aspect of your career that you're particularly proud of, Amy?
I've had such a fun career. I mean, I really have been very fortunate to do so many things that I love. I'm very, very passionate about what I do. I'm really proud of the team I have right now. I can't really do anything all by myself.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to come from a group of others. And that's another thing I would say is something to learn, to tell back 20 years ago to myself, that the value in having a really smart and strong team is, you can't put a price tag on it. You can't grow a business on your own. You have to have a really solid team. So I would say that the thing I'm most proud of is currently I guess the team that I've built right now. We're doing really exciting things, and I'm really grateful to be surrounded by such smart people.
Well, shout outs to Amy's team. You're doing a bang up job. Now, earlier you mentioned you're an optimistic person. What are you most optimistic about when it comes to real estate or your future career?
I love the period of time that we're in. It's really fun to be in a down market when you're on the buying side. And so, that's an exciting place to be. And so getting to ride up wave is really fun. When you bought enough in the downturn, then riding the wave up is really fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking forward to that. I like, seeing that happen. We're, buying new deals in new cities all the time. So it's exciting to get to experience new places and kind of immerse ourselves into new communities. Yeah, the country's a bit of a mess right now, so I'm interested to see how this all plays out.
Well, you're good at cleaning up messes, so this is just another opportunity for you.
I know I'd like to be a politician one day. That's I've decided this.
Okay, well, I liked you up until that point, but I think I still could.
No,
I'm
you're
kidding.
gonna change your view on politicians.
Good point. Oh, wow. See, good work, Amy. Wow. So to the hundreds of millions of people who are tuning into this, many might have questions. They might be inspired beyond just the great vegan fair in Chicago. Where can we funnel these people? Where can they learn more about you, your team, or anything you want us to know more about, Amy?
Sure. Our website, you can check us out, is clearinvestgroup.com. We are in the middle of a new fund that we opened this last December. It's a $100 million fund. We're about 60 million raised in it. We've bought about 20 to 25% of the assets that are going to be inside of the fund. So there's a lot of upcoming excitement for us and our company with what we're doing. We're going to close it out at the end of this year as far as the fundraising. And so check out our website for more information about us. And
check it out. You'll be a smarter because of it. Amy Rubenstein, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Matt Balaker podcast. To learn more, please check out mattbalaker.com and encourage your friends to like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate it.